Alright, I am back with another video, and today I really wanted to take another look at Drunken Master Monk. It's one of the subclasses that I've kind of not focused on too much. When the class first came out with patch 8, I did do a dedicated video on it because I wanted to kind of make a what if there was a monk companion video, and I felt like Drunken Master added a lot of flavour that worked really well. But outside of that, I've not really taken a lot of looks at it, especially when a lot of people, especially when the patch first came out, were kind of saying that Drunken Master wasn't the best when it came to the monk subclasses. And no, it's not, open hand is, but honestly, it brings a lot to the table, especially flavour-wise, and not just the flavour of alcohol, to really just make fun and interesting builds. Now, originally this build was going to be a combination of Drunken Master Monk and some form of Bard, but that ended up being genuinely terrible, one of my worst performing builds ever, so I scrapped it and decided to replace some of the levels in Bard with Rogue instead. And you guys can probably see where I'm going with this. And in the end, it improved the build dramatically with a ton more utility, much more versatility in terms of how it's able to disarm and dismantle opponents, and finally, having a pretty decent set of mental stats all around, high wisdom, high charisma, and a decent intelligence, make you an incredibly effective face of the party, and when you combine it with all the equipment that we can get our hands on, you actually create quite an interesting and tanky build that can dodge, have a massive pool of HP as well as temporary hit points, and have consistent health recovery, and then just being able to deal out pretty decent damage each turn, but mainly just kind of being a tricky fighter that's a bit hard to pin down, as well as being able to kind of retaliate with things like direct attack, redirect attack, should I say, from the Drunken Master Monk. So I hope you guys all enjoy this one. I think it's a fairly fun build, so let's get into it. I've decided to play as a gnome today, because I don't play as gnomes nearly enough. Again, trying to use some of the races that I wouldn't normally use, so today we're picking up Gnome. This is going to give us access to Gnome Cunning, giving us advantage on Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws, which is going to be very, very nice, considering we're going to have really decent stats across the board. We're basically never going to fail those saving throws, which is really nice. We're also going to be playing as a Forest Gnome, just because it's going to give us access to speak with animals, which is going to be great for roleplay opportunities, obviously, as we are going to be quite high in Charisma, so being able to cast Speak with Animals once per long rest, which just lasts for the whole long rest, it's just going to give you way more options for dialogue right away at level 1. You also do get the standard dark vision. Moving on to our starting class, of course, whenever I build with Rogue, I like to start with Rogue. It's going to give us pretty much everything that we want, including rapier proficiency, which is going to be our main weapon of choice for this build, as well as light armor, which we're not going to use, thanks to Monk's unarmored defense, and obviously, the big thing, a ton of skill proficiencies and access to sneak attack at level 1. For our background, I just went with Entertainer, because I really like the idea of this, like, kind of almost like drunkard at the tavern, who's, like, so merry, like, as a gnome as well, who's so merry and full of life that even when they're a bit sloshed, they just absolutely bring life to the bar. They're singing, they're dancing, they're coordinating everyone, they're all cheering and clapping together. So I don't know, I felt like Entertainer felt like a pretty fun thing. That's going to give us access to Acrobatics and Performance, which are two pretty decent skills to have. I would say Performance more so than Acrobatics, but really, you can pick any background. Right, moving on to the stat spread, and yes, I have to admit, we are using the Gloves of Dexterity for this one. Unfortunately, this is because, well, it wasn't really easy to get both decent Wisdom and Charisma without having to sacrifice something, and the Gloves of Dexterity are really the only gloves that I would use on this build, to be honest, so it just made sense to just use them for this build. Hey, it's been a while since I've had to rely on them too much. But basically, what this is going to allow us to do is have a decent amount of Charisma alongside our Wisdom, like I said, and that originally is a holdover from the Bard build, where we obviously needed it for our spellcasting, but Charisma is actually going to be really important for our choice of weapon, I'll talk about that more in a minute, as well as our one of our dirty tricks from Swashbuckler, because yes, we're going with Swashbuckler today, because of course we are, it's the perfect fit for Drunken Master. So, we want a high charisma anyway, and again, this is going to allow us to be a really effective party face, and again, those saving throws with the gnomish advantage are going to just be so, so nice. So really, I do still recommend this, although to be honest, you might not need the charisma as much, but I wanted to build with charisma, so we are using the Gloves of Dexterity today. If you're going to be following my leveling scheme for this build, you're going to be building more into the monk stuff first, so until you get the Gloves of Dexterity a little bit later into Act 1, I would maybe dump Charisma and put those points into Dexterity instead, just for the meanwhile. Well, not fully dump Charisma, you could take some points out of Intelligence, take some points out of Charisma, and bump up your Dexterity instead, and have that be your starting stats. But speaking of our final stats, Strength is at 8 because we don't need it, Dexterity is at 8 because we're using the Gloves of Dexterity, Constitution is at 14. By the time this build is finished, I will actually have an extra free feat for you guys to pick. And I actually did decide to take the tough feat in the end, just to give us a bit more survivability for when we do get hit, and honestly, it helped a lot. So Constitution at 14 now, plus either a bump to Constitution or a taking of the tough feat towards the end of the build will definitely help you out in the long run. Intelligence is at 12. This is just here because I didn't feel the need to put any into strength, as well as the fact that it is going to help out with quite a few skill checks, so again, party face. Wisdom is obviously here for our monk abilities, our unarmored defense, etc. And charisma is here for some of our swashbuckler abilities, and obviously party face once again. For our skill proficiencies, we get a lot to start out with, and this is what I've decided to go for. We get our acrobatics as well as our performance from our background. I've gone with stealth, because of course I have. We're a rogue at the end of the day, we like to have our stealth. And I've also gone for deception, intimidation, and persuasion, putting our expertise into persuasion. Entirely up to you what you kind of want to do with that. But otherwise, I do, like, really, you could go for sleight of hand or anything like that, but I just like these skills. I like having all of the charisma skills. I will point out, though, I've just remembered that Drunken Master actually does get performance proficiency, so maybe you might want to change from the entertainer background, but it's entirely up to you. I like getting inspiration from the entertainer stuff, but otherwise, if you want to actually optimize your skill proficiencies, then maybe pick a different one. Entirely up to you, but yeah, that's level 1. At level 2, we're going to dive straight into Monk and start our leveling there, because this is going to give us quite a nice early game package, because obviously you achieve level 2 pretty much right off the bat in this game. You're going to get access to your armored defense right away, which obviously gives you much more options for early game armor and such. We'll be able to use our dexterity for our monk attacks, so that's great. Our unarmed strikes will have our bonus action unarmed strikes, so now we can attack with a sneak attack as our main action and still get a little bonus action attack, which feels pretty good, as well as flurry of blows too. At Monk level 2, you're going to gain access to your Patient Defense, which is really, really nice on this build. If you don't want to use your bonus action to be offensive with something like the Dirty Tricks, you can use it defensively to make it so that you can just basically make yourself impossible to hit. By the time this build is finished, we should be rounding out at about 19 AC. If you want to put haste on this build, you'll be coming out at about 21, which is pretty decent, especially with Patient Defense. But I actually had that level of defense with the Bard version, and I was still getting hit quite a lot, so you might just want to make sure that you're, if you need to be defensive, you are able to activate this and just, make yourself much, much harder to hit. Obviously, we get to dash and disengage as a bonus action too, but we'll be getting rid of that pretty quickly once we take another level in Rogue, because obviously then we don't have to spend a key point to do that. Moving on to Monk level 3, we get our subclass, and of course we're going with Way of the Drunken Master. This is going to get us a few things, namely, we are immune to the negative effects of being drunk, which means we're not going to have a penalty to a bunch of saving throws that we would have had otherwise, or checks I should say, disadvantage on dexterity and charisma checks, and we regain half our key points rounded down, basically once per day when we drink alcohol. So it's just a little bit of resource management, nothing crazy. And then also you get proficiency in performance here, so again, you can swap from the entertainment background if you want. We also get the Drunken Technique. This is going to replace our Flurry of Blows, allowing us to punch twice in quick succession, granting ourselves an additional bit of movement speed, as well as the benefits of the Disengage action. So now we can roll our Disengage action into a powerful Flurry of Blows just by spending 1 key point, which is nice. This means that we don't always have to spend our bonus action just to disengage. If we need to, we can just kind of mix it in as we want. Between Swashbuckler and Drunken Technique, you'll actually be able to get out of combat and be really slippery very, very often. So it's actually a little bit of synergy there, which is quite nice. At Monk level 4, you're going to get a few things. First of all, slow fall, resistance to falling damage, nothing crazy. We're also going to get Life of the Party, which is one of the cooler introductions that BG3 made with this subclass. Every time your Intoxicating Strike hits, which we will talk about in a minute, your monk will gain Life of the Party, which increases their armor class and attack rolls against drunk targets. So while we will have a base AC of 19, if we are able to make our enemy drunk, which we will be able to, you'll be able to gain a +1 bonus to our armor class, rounding it out to a nice and even 20, as well as a wisdom modifier bonus to our attack rolls against drunk targets, so we're way more likely to hit. Overall, it's a pretty nice passive buff that you're going to get pretty frequently if you're using the Intoxicating Strike, which we're about to talk about. You can either replace your main action attack or your bonus action attack with your Intoxicating Strike, so that pairs nicely with Swashbuckler again. Sneak attack as your main attack and an action, and then go for an extra attack later on once we get that, and then you can bonus action Intoxicating Strike as well. Basically, you can hit a creature with your bare fists and possibly get them drunk. If you have never played this class before, it has the absolutely amazing animation of you tossing a bottle of alcohol into the air and then punching it as it comes back down, smashing it all over your opponent, which I think is amazing. You're literally punching them with a bottle of alcohol, which I absolutely love. So that already, this ability is amazing. But it's basically just we're kind of going to be replacing our unarmed strike a lot of the time, where we can kind of choose to spend a key point to give our enemies a debuff, as well as be able to activate a bunch of our abilities like Life of the Party, but also some other stuff, which I think is going to be some fun synergy when we get to the equipment section. We also do get to choose our first feat of the build, and since at this point, I would say you should probably have the Gloves of Dex, you definitely wanted to have respect into the stats you see here by this point, and since we're focusing on our monk stuff first, let's bump up that wisdom. At Monk level 5, we're going to gain access to extra attack, because of course we are, as well as our Stunning Strike, which allows us to potentially stun targets, basically making them completely useless if they fail the con save. And then at Monk level 6, you're going to gain access to two really cool things. First of all our unarmed strikes can overcome non-magical resistance, which is great. We also get Redirect Attack, an amazing ability that was so good it made it into the base Monk's kit in D&D 2024. When a creature misses you with a melee attack, not just a ranged attack like with Deflect Missiles feature, you can spend one key point as a reaction to use Unarmed Strike back at them. So basically, if an attack misses you, you can just punch him in the face, which I think is amazing. I love the idea of that for a Drunken fighter, but also for a swashbuckling rogue. That just feels extremely fun. We also get Leap to your feet. When we're prone, we only have to use half the movement to stand up. Not the craziest ability in the world, but hey, when you're up against a Steel Watcher, it helps you just be that little bit more mobile. But yeah, we definitely want Redirect Attack, for sure. Now that we've hit the 6th level of Rogue, of Monk I should say, let's go back to Rogue for a bit, giving us the cunning actions, Hide, Dash, and Disengage. These are just great additions to our kit, although we're pretty much never going to need to use Disengage. If we're spending a bonus action to Disengage, we're probably doing it with our Flurry of Blows, which allows us to do so. So the bonus action Dash is probably going to be the main thing that we use here. At Rogue level 3, we get to choose our subclass, and of course, we're going for the Swashbuckler. Swashbuckler is just going to give us a ton of fun stuff to work with, in addition to the Drunken Master. Again, I almost feel like a Jack Sparrow type character comes to mind here, where you're just kind of like dodging and dipping and ducking while like pulling off a sword fight with your rapier, and then occasionally just kicking the dude in the face because you see an opportunity after a pretty cheeky drunken dodge. I don't know, it just feels fun, like combining the drunken, like kind of master style of like martial arts fighting with the swashbuckling nature of like a pirate-esque rogue just feels like a really fun combination of flavors that, honestly, I'm surprised I haven't seen more of. But again, Jack Sparrow definitely comes to mind. But anyways, you're going to get fancy footwork. If you make a melee attack against a target, the target cannot make opportunity attacks against you for the rest of your turn. So if you're in a one-on-one fight, you actually do get the benefits of Disengage effectively. But if you're in a group of enemies, which in my solo testing happened a lot, you find that actually getting the full Disengage from your bonus action Flurry of Blows was definitely the better choice. That Drunken technique is definitely the better way to go if you're in a group, but fancy footwork is more than enough if you're just on a one-on-one fight. You're not going to take opportunity attacks from other enemies. So again, you have a lot of options to slip in and out of combat really easily. You're also going to get Rakish Audacity, giving you a +2 bonus to your initiative rolls, which will scale with your rogue level, and you will no longer need to use advantage to trigger a sneak attack as long as you are within 1.5 meters of the target and you don't have disadvantage. So as long as you're in melee range and you don't have disadvantage, you can always consistently get off your sneak attacks, which, since we're using a rapier with this build, feels very nice to do. So yeah, Swashbuckler and Drunken Master, lots of crossover with the flavor, but also the abilities, which is quite fun. At Rogue level 4, we're going to gain access to the Dirty Tricks as well as our next feat of the build. We're going to get Dirty Trick, Flick of the Wrist, oh my god. Dirty Trick, Flick of the Wrist is going to allow you to disarm your opponents, giving you advantage on your next attack if you manage to succeed. It's a dexterity saving throw, and it goes off of our dexterity modifier, if I remember correctly. Some of these go off for charisma, some of these go off for dexterity. It's a bit of a mixed bag, and I can never remember which is which, so be sure to check the wiki if you ever aren't sure. But we have 18 in all, we're going to have 18 in all of them, so it doesn't matter. Dirty Trick, Flick of the Wrist basically is probably the best one that I found to work in my combat testing. Consistently disarming enemies is really, really good, and one thing I found actually is because of our increased movement speed from Monk, plus all the other stuff we have going on, more often than not, even if you spend all of your actions or bonus actions to to attacks or whatever, if you still have a bit of movement speed left at the end of your turn and you have an enemy that you've disarmed and their weapon is on the floor, you can go just pick it up and they'll be completely immobilized. And that's really easy to do with this build. Like, they just don't have a weapon anymore, which is absolutely hilarious, and I love doing that. So yeah, Flick of the Wrist is probably our best bet here most of the time. We do also have Dirty Trick, Vicious Mockery, which is the one that goes off of our Charisma, as you can see here. In fact, it actually says in the tooltip, this one's an attack roll, so it's Dexterity. This one's our Charisma modifier. This basically just lets you cast Vicious Mockery as a bonus action, giving you advantage if it succeeds, dealing 2d4 psychic damage. Overall, it's great as a ranged option to have if we've managed to slip out of combat and we don't really want to go back in. We can just do a bit of extra damage with our bonus action at range. But honestly, you're probably not going to be using this one too much, despite how amazing it is. Flick of the Wrist is still better. And then also, we have Dirty Trick, Sand, Toss. You get to toss a handful of sand at your enemy and possibly blind them, giving you advantage on your next attack if you succeed. So, and obviously blinded means I have disadvantage on attack rolls. Ranged attackers can't really attack so well. You know, you've got a bunch of things going for you here. So overall, Sand Toss is good, does a bit of bludgeoning damage. Flick of the Wrist is also really good, does our weapon damage. I would say that's probably the best one to use, if I'm being real. Vicious Mockery, somewhere in the middle. But yeah, we also do get to pick our second feat of the build, and at this point, since now we have the Dirty Trick, let's bump up that Charisma. Now, we could go to Rogue level 5 if we wanted to be a bit more tanky with Uncanny Dodge, but I think going back to Monk is better because we get to have more key points as well as be able to pick up another feat at the final level of the build. We're going to get Evasion, making it so that we only take half damage on a failed dex save and no damage on a successful dex save if we're against a damaging effect that forces a dex save, such as Fireball. And finally, at Monk level 8, our final key point, rounding us out to a total of 9, and also our final feat of the build. Now, like I said earlier, you do have basically a free feat here to just do whatever you want to do with it. I mean, Defensive Duelist, unfortunately, we're locked out of, but that's fine. You can go for an ability score improvement, bumping up your Constitution to give you a total of 99 HP and slightly better Constitution saving throws, but honestly, you don't really need them. The only thing you would need a con save for is for being drunk, and we're immune to the negative effects of that and actually want to be drunk, so that's not really a huge deal. Otherwise, we really don't get a lot of usage out of Tavern Brawler either, because we have no strength, unless you want to consider Elixirs of Hill Giant Strength as alcohol, in which case, go crazy. Otherwise, though, Savage Attacker could be decent. You've got a lot of different things here. Lucky obviously fits the vibe of the build quite well. Alert can make it so you always go first, which could be quite nice. We're a rapier build, so Charger is always fun for me. I personally love doing that. But honestly, the tough feat, just bringing us up to 111 HP on Tactician, feels very, 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 very good. I really, really like this. I just think it gives us that extra bit of survivability that feels really good in the end game, so that's what I'm going to go with. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a slippery little guy. You're going to be able to weave in and out of combat extremely easily with multiple options to help you do so, such as the Rakish Attack or Drunken Technique. You're going to be consistently getting off sneak attacks, as well as being able to disarm your opponents, insult them with Vicious Mockery, giving them disadvantage on their attack rolls, blinding them, stunning them, getting them drunk. Again, your Rakish Sneak Attack just being a great source of consistent damage. You just have a lot going for you with this build. You're going to have a decently high AC thanks to things like Life of the Party and our overall AC buffs, so you're going to be pretty damn hard to hit and pretty damn hard to pin down, as well as deal a decent chunk of damage back. It's not my highest damage dealing build of all time, it just has a lot of utility and a lot of fun flavor combinations, again, between Drunken Master and Swashbuckler, and again, you're an extremely effective party face. You've got Speak with Animals, plus all the stats to make everything you want to do pretty consistent to pull off, and again, if you decide to go down the route of a gnome, you're going to have amazing saving throws too. Like, honestly, you're just really good at everything. You're just not a master of everything. It's literally the jack of all trades thing. Like, don't get me wrong, you're going to do a lot of things really well, but obviously you're not as good at straight fighting as something like a fighter or a barbarian. You don't really have a lot of spell casting options, so you're a bit more limited in that sense. But overall, you just have a lot going for you, which I think is an extremely fun way to play a character anyway, just having a little bit of everything and having fun and unique options that maybe not everyone gets access to. But of course, as with all my builds, the equipment is where it really starts to shine. So let's talk about it. Now, you may be thinking, well, he said Vicious Mockery is something we're not going to be going for a lot, so why do we have such high charisma? Well, again, I wanted to really lean into that flavor of being an entertainer. So, we're looking at the Harmonic Dueler. This allows us to Wield a rapier. It's a +1 rapier, pretty good, has all the standard stuff, but it comes with a unique ability called Mellow Harmony. We make a performance check, which, funnily enough, synergizes really well with Drunken Master because you get performance anyway. You get to make a performance check. Succeeding grants all of your melee weapon attacks additional damage equal to your charisma modifier. So, because our charisma modifier is a +4, that's a +4 to all of our attacks, making that +5 a +9. 1d8 +9 with our sneak attacks and everything else we can do is very, very good. That's a lot of extra damage, and it just fits the build really nicely. But of course, in the early game, you can pick up the Sword of Screams, which just deals an extra d4 psychic damage, which is still good. Moving on to our equipment, our armor choices, and I'm going to be real with you now, I'm really proud of this one. The Cold Brim Hat. Now you may be thinking, what the hell does that do for the build? Well, let me tell you. Once per turn, any condition inflicted on a target also applies 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost. Encrusted with Frost makes it so the affected entity will have disadvantage on Dex saving throws, as well as when there are 7 or more turns remaining, they must succeed a con save or take a d4 of cold damage and become frozen. Frozen means that they are completely incapacitated until they take bludgeoning, thunder, or force damage, in which case the condition ends. On a successful save, it only takes half damage, and afterwards the frost slows away, and it will be removed by burning. So, if we get an opponent drunk, they are not only going to have disadvantage on dexterity and charisma checks, they're also going to have a disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. And because we inflict so many different status conditions between our dirty tricks and our ability to inflict drunk on people with our attacks, those stacks build up fairly quickly, allowing you to get off the frozen a little bit more often than you would expect. However, none of that matters, because the real reason I chose this hat is because that is by inflicting Encrusted with Frost using the bottle that we punch in the animation, you're literally serving your opponent a cold one. I was extremely proud of that joke. Yes, we're serving up an icy cold brew. We're serving up a cold one that's so cold it can completely freeze your opponent. Come on, you gotta give that one to me. Maybe this is a more Canadian thing that some people aren't really gonna find as funny, but you know, cracking a cold one with the boys. Come on, you gotta go for it. It's an amazing. You can replace the hat with whatever you like. This is just a fun flavor thing that does have some utility. Oh man. I've been waiting all video to make that joke. Moving swiftly along. Quicker Protection gives us a +1 bonus to our armor class and saving throws. This is just here to give our armor class a little bit of a bump, as I felt like without it, we were just getting hit a little too often. Of course, we're going with the Drunken Cloth with this build. Originally, when this was a bard, I actually had the Potent Robe here to make Vicious Mockery a bit more powerful, but really, it didn't end up working out too well for us, so going with the Drunken Cloth instead just felt a bit better. While you have the drunk condition, which you should do all the time with this build, you'll have advantage on con saves. So with this build, we're going to have advantage on con, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws by the time we're done. That's really good. And you're also going to gain temporary hit points equal to your constitution modifier at the start of each of your turns. To be honest, that is an argument for bumping up your con as opposed to taking the tough feat, as that's only going to be 2 temporary HP per turn. But honestly, it's just a little bit of extra tankiness, and overall, it does work out pretty nicely. But if you wanted to bump up your con, you can. Or in the late game, you could perhaps pick up the Amulet of Constitution, which would obviously give you a much bigger buff and way more HP. But honestly, this is just here because, again, it's the flavor, and having the advantage on con saves is really nice. If you wanted to throw the Darkfire Shortbow on this build and allow yourself to concentrate on haste in tricky fights, which would honestly give you a ton of stuff, more AC, more movement speed, which plays into the archetype of being a slippery character, as well as giving you the extra action every turn. I didn't include it in this build for testing reasons, because I wanted to see how the build fared without it, and honestly, it's really good without haste, but if you get haste on you with the Darkfire Shortbow, oh boy, it really elevates this build, and the Drunken Cloth plays really nicely into that with that advantage on con saves. So, consider it. Obviously, the Gloves of Dexterity automatically sets our Dexterity score to 18. Nothing more to say. And finally, the Boots of Uninhibited Kashigo, just going to give us a bit of extra damage to our unarmed strikes, equal to our Wisdom modifier, making them pretty damn decent. 1d6 plus 8, as opposed to our regular weapons 1d8 plus 5, so both feel about on par with each other. Moving on to our accessories here. We've got the Amulet of the Drunkard, because of course we do. While you're drunk, you recover 2 to 8 hit points per turn while drunk, and will increase the inebriation duration by 5 rounds. So overall, it's just going to be passive healing every turn, which pairs nicely with the Whispering Promise, which that healing will give us an ability, an extra 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws every turn for 2 turns. So basically, because we're healing every turn, we're basically getting bless every turn, which is nice. And that makes our saving throws even better. You're pretty much never going to fail a saving throw with this build. And finally, the Ring of Mental Inhibition. Because we're going to be inflicting Encrusted with Frost, Drunk, and blindness and such, or disarm, or whatever from the, or vicious mockery from any of our dirty tricks, stun, drunk, all of it, we're actually going to be able to get off the Ring of Mental Inhibition quite a lot. Whenever a foe fails a saving throw against one of our spells or actions, so again, basically everything that we do, we're going to get Mental Fatigue, which will actually give them a penalty to Wisdom and Intelligence and Charisma saving throws, and once you build up enough stacks, they take a bit of psychic damage. But that debuff to saving throws can really help you and your whole party out. So it's a really nice passive buff. I also love the idea of this guy being so annoying that all of his constant bullshit just drains on your mental state to the point where you just can't make saving throws anymore. It's very, very funny. The only thing I haven't really talked about here is our early game armor option, which I forgot to talk about. There wasn't really anything, so the Armor of Uninhibited Kashigo is just kind of the only early game armor, but if you get the Drunken class subclass, it's not really gonna do much for you. Although this version doesn't require you to spend a key point to actually do the redirect attack. However, it does require you to spend a key point for patient defense. But really, there wasn't really any other early game clothing options that really worked. Maybe the Blood Guzzler garb? I'm not sure. I honestly really wasn't sure about an early game option. Just any unarmored defense option, any clothing option is going to do. So really, it's a pick your favorite here. There's not much, unfortunately, for early game equipment, as a lot of this stuff you're going to get pretty soon. And again, I haven't really thought of an early game boot option either, but things like the Disintegrating Nightwalkers always work. Maybe even the Evasive Shoes if you want even more AC. Really, it's entirely up to you. So again, pick your favorites. Whatever early game options you can come across, it's not going to affect this build too much. The end game stuff is more just going to elevate the build that already exists. But yeah, that is the build. Not really much else to say here. We do have some camp clothing for this build. We have the Gandrel chest piece and the leather boots from the Fear Tailor's Camp Clothing mod, available on all platforms. And no special dyes here. I quite like the default color, so I stuck with it. But yeah, that is the whole build. And really, not really too much more to say. Overall, it's a pretty fun and unique way to play the Drunken Master Monk. Just adding that little bit of extra from Swashbuckler just to give you this, again, like this sword-dueling Drunken Master kind of like... It's a mix of elegant sword fights and ruthless kind of surprise unarmed strikes. It just feels very fun to play, and the fact that we've been able to weave in like high wisdom and high charisma just for an exceptionally fun, flavorful party face. I don't know, I like this build. Do I think it's my best one ever? No, I would say, especially on the power scale, it's a little bit on the middle side, but the problem is not even the problem, the benefit comes from its utility. Disarming foes with pretty consistent results, again, that dex save being hard for them to make is really, really good. As well as being able to just be slippery, moving in and out, getting out of attack ranges, being able to find cover. You just have a lot to work with, and I feel like the build benefits from that in a lot of ways. I just think people will find the flavor of this build really fun, as opposed to the mechanics, but the mechanics really do inform the flavor as well. So I think overall it works out pretty nicely. But yeah, that is going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.